Hi everyone, in this lesson we're going to talk through different types of software within a computer system. So we're going to understand what software actually is and actually recognising different types of software that exist. There are a couple of main types of software you need to be aware of. Before we get into that, we need to talk about what software actually is. Now, we've already talked in Year 7 about hardware. Hardware is the actual physical parts of the computer system. So you can see here we've got our monitor, we've got the actual case and all the actual like hard drive and RAM and all the parts that make up your computer system. But software is actually the programs that run on the computer. So you can see here, for an example, we've got Google Chrome running, which is a piece of software. When that software is running, it actually runs in something called the RAM. Now, we've covered the RAM as well. RAM is temporary storage inside of your computer that just holds data that keeps that program running. So it might be Microsoft Word, it might be that you haven't saved the document yet but you're still working on it. That document is saved in RAM, and as we know, if the program is closed before it has time to be saved into the hard drive, it's lost. So the main two types of software you need to be aware of are system software and application software. System software, generally speaking, have a role to maintain the computer system, whereas application software is what we use to perform tasks. So starting with system software, as I say, it is to run and maintain the computer system. And the three main types that we're talking about are the operating system, drivers, and utility software. Now, you may not be familiar with the term of operating system, but you use them all the time you use a computer. It has many different roles within it. So, for example, it allows your software to communicate with other hardware. It allows you to open, close, save, and just generally manage your files on your computer, as well as allowing a user interface so you can actually control the computer. But let's actually look at one of these operating systems so we can see what we're talking about. Now, one example, and the most common example you might be familiar with, is something called Windows. So Windows is actually the main program that runs all of the other programs on it. So you can see down here we've got our Windows logo. When we press that, this opens up all of these various different options. And these are all programs that we can run and open because the user interface allows us to do that. When I say user interface, I mean actually everything we can see, everything we can interact with. So obviously you might have a mouse pointer that you control around the screen, you might have the ability to type in and that will show on something like the search bar. So you can actually interact, so actually use the system. So the user interface is only there because the operating system put it there. And a similar sort of thing happens with iOS, which is what iPhones run off of. It's the exact same premise. All of this on this screen right now is being put there by the operating system. So the operating system allows you to click into, these various different applications. It allows you to search for new ones. It allows you to open up files and sort of change the files that are in there. Without the operating system, none of your computer just would not work. There would be no way to control the applications on there. So as you can see, we've got a load of different examples on the right hand side. These are our most common. So Windows is obviously your kind of Windows, Microsoft desktop computers. Android is used in a lot of devices, primarily with tablets and with phones. Things like Samsung and Google phones use Android, for example. iOS, as I say, is what we use for the Apple iPhone here. You can have iPad OS, which is what I'm currently recording this lesson on, and Mac OS, which is for MacBooks and obviously Apple's computer range. And all of them are subtly different, all of them operate in different ways, some are more obviously different than others. We'll talk about that in a little while. Which also brings us on to the topic of drivers. Now, a driver is what we use with peripherals. If you can't remember from previously, a peripheral is something additional within our computer system. So it might be a mouse, it might be a keyboard, it might be a screen even, or any number of different devices, input and output devices basically. Before we can actually use a peripheral with our computer, we actually need to install something called this driver. Now I've given a little example underneath. Let's say you're on your computer, your desktop computer, and you want to use your Xbox controller to play a game on it. Now, immediately, your computer does not know what the Xbox controller is. So the driver acts like a little translator. So the driver tells the computer, oh, when the A button's pressed, this is what should happen on screen, or when this stick is moved, this movement should happen on screen. And this driver actually translates those actions across. Without the driver, the computer wouldn't understand what the game controller actually does, so it wouldn't know, oh, what happens if you press A? I don't know, so therefore I can't do that. And this is also true of, let's say I wanted to use this Xbox controller in a PlayStation. PlayStation doesn't have this driver installed, so it's not possible to do that. But it's possible to download a lot of drivers onto a PC, which is why you can use Xbox controllers on a PC, for example. As long as you've got this driver software, it will work. That's the idea anyway. It just depends on whether this driver is compatible with the operating system. And then finally, just briefly going to touch on utility software. Now, utility software is anything that helps you manage the computer in some way. We haven't covered all of these. This is a GCSE image, but certainly we've covered some of them. Antivirus software, which allows us to comb through our files, checking for any viruses and removing them, that is something that is classed as utility software. It's not something you would use to perform a task, it's something you do to make sure your computer is running nicely. Something that allows you to delete data automatically, something that allows you to update your software without having to do anything. All of these things, we don't actively use them as people. The computer would use them to keep things running smoothly. All utility software does is keep your computer running smoothly in various different ways. So all of that was system software, but now we have the other type of software, which is something called application software, also better known as apps. So apps obviously exist on your phone as the most commonly way of sort of thinking about them, but obviously applications are anything that you can use on a computer to perform a task. So you might think apps like, oh, WhatsApp or Facebook, these are all things you can use on your phone, but actually those are called that because they perform tasks on your computer or your phone, I suppose. So there are two categories that application software fall into. We've got general purpose and special or specific purpose. And it does exactly what it sounds like. General means, oh, a general number of things we can use the software for. So I can do lots of different tasks using the same piece of software. So for example, on Microsoft Word, obviously Microsoft Word is a word processing software, but it uses way more than just the ability to word process. It can generate emails. It can do a lot more than you might recognize. Same with PowerPoint. PowerPoint obviously is used for making slideshows, but it can also generate videos. It can also pull in a lot of extra functionality. And the same goes for Google Chrome. Google Chrome runs websites and is a browser for that, but there's a lot more besides that it can do. So these are general programs that can run a lot of different purposes. But special purpose only focuses on one or a few specific tasks. So the examples I've gotten here, some you may recognize, some you may not. Sims, I don't refer to the game The Sims, unfortunately, although that technically kind of is special software purpose, we'll get there. We're talking about our register. So when you're at school, you have a register, obviously, with your name and with your in or not and your attendance, generally speaking, so obviously you get ticked to say whether you're in or not. That is a very specific task. That piece of software is basically written solely for keeping the registers obviously safe, secure, and up to date. So that is what Sims does. Some of you may have heard of QuickBooks. I wouldn't expect any of you to use it. QuickBooks is what a lot of businesses use to manage their finances. Again, specifically used for that role. And if you want a more specific example for yourselves, you may say, well, Hegarty Maths. So Hegarty Maths is the logo for it. Hegarty Maths has a role just to be used to revising maths content. That's the only thing it does, so therefore it has been specially written for that purpose, with that purpose in mind. So just to round up before we go, remember that hardware is obviously anything physical within your computer system, so anything you can touch, anything you can interact with. Software are the programs that you interact with on a computer, so things like PowerPoint and Google Chrome, anything like games, all games, anything that's written in software, anything that's written in code is software.